Hello, good evening, and a very warm welcome to The Turning Point. Our guest this evening is a representative of Sri Lanka's youth, and we'll find out more about what they have in store, the youth, especially in a country that's all set, apparently, for change. And he's, of course, none other than Mr. Hadi Jamaldeen, who is the executive director and co-founder of Steradian Capital, and also Nth Degree UK and W15. The holding company is Lanka Realty Investments PLC. Thank you, Hadi, for being on The Turning Point. Much appreciate your support and for being here.
Thank you very much, Faraz, for having me.
Thank you. Hadi, I just wanted to ask you, could you tell us about your journey in the finance industry and what led you to your current role as the executive director of Steradian Capital?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, I went for further education to the United Kingdom. I was at Warwick University, and once completing my university degree, I decided to stay back in the UK and follow accountancy course whilst working. And on qualification, I was working there at Anderson and then at Freeman and Partners. I fell into the world of property finance and property, and I was looking after about 56 different clients in practice. And thereafter went and joined industry in a company that was run by two others called Peter Dykes and Piers Rook. Were investing in UK property, and I was looking after acquisitions, the financing of the acquisitions, the management, and then the subsequent disposal. So that was my sort of way into property and finance. Thereafter, I went and joined Barcap as to understand the banking side of how they look at lending and all the more sort of advanced financial products. And at the end of 2007-8, we set up our own property fund, three of us, and which I ran up until 2013. We built up a largest portfolio, which we then sold off, and then decided what to do next. And that was the time that the war had finished, and I was very positive about Sri Lanka at that point. So set up maybe 5-6 other investors that has worked with me in the past in the UK and convinced them to come along with whatever funds I had made there, and came all into Sri Lanka to set up a similar setup as we were doing in the UK. So that's how we arrived here. And 13 years ago, significantly younger, more daring than I am now, went all in to Sri Lanka. One, of course, it's my home. Felt like it was the right time to come and give back, utilize the expertise and the connections internationally that I have to come and build something similar here in Sri Lanka. So I'm now 10 years into it,
Right.
10, 11 years into it, and it has indeed been a very interesting journey so far.
And you somehow you appeal to the board, the shareholders, the board of Hayleys, Sri Lanka's sort of one of their most prestigious companies. You spent about 9 years there.
Yes.
Tell us the story about that, and then I want to know what your feelings are about this time limit, especially for somebody of your age, because you have much more to put in.
Sure. No, so I think the Haley's experience is fantastic. Mr. Damika Pereira, Mr. Mohan Pandit K invited me to join the board as I was setting up my own operation here. So being part of that board gave me a lot of visibility in terms of what was going on in various sectors as a diversified conglomerate as it was. But again, when I joined that board, the company was, in my view, still sleeping. It had 300 million net. The management salaries and bonuses far outweighed the dividends paid to the shareholders. And my job was really, as an independent director, to sit there and to see how best you can bring about each of those sectors to its actual potential. And the most important role was to ensure that equity prevailed for all stakeholders. By that, what I mean is do justice by the customers, do justice by the staff that's actually working for Hayleys. I met the top management. Then not to forget the shareholders as well. Public listed company, not only the controlling shareholders, there are minority shareholders. So finding that balance was really, really important. And within the 9 years, we're a company that then managed to do 40 billion. And I remember saying that, early doors, saying that this is a company that had an ROE of roughly 5 to 6%. You could have sold all the assets, put the money on deposit, and it would have got more. But that this has the potential of 20 billion. And at that point, it was a big statement. But we've exceeded 40 billion now. I'm delighted that I could contribute within that 9 year period. And I think now the governance rule has come in. So the governance rules are such that 1/3 of the board must be independent. And if an independent director serves 9 years, the independence is then exhausted. So I think it's a good rule. Personally, what I believe is that you go when you blind pretty fast. So when you're fresh into it and you're taking on a particular role, you're looking at it with fresh eyes. And as an independent director, 9 years is a long time. And I personally, even though, young and have energy and all of it, I think the max that I could give to them, or it's a curve that goes downwards if you take year zero to be here. So I'm sure there are other independents who come in with more vigor, who will contribute. And I think it's a very positive thing.
It's good. How does that compare to the corporate world, say, in the UK?
No, there are similar things. In the UK, naturally, you won't last that length. The attrition is something that people want to factor in, bring in new blood. And there's consistent overhauling of boards in a far more aggressive manner than it is here.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's not too bad an idea.
No, I think it's a progressive idea, especially with independence.
And well, you've told us why you've sort of set up here. And were there any particular experiences at Hayleys that hold you in good stead today?
Absolutely. I think as a 34-year-old coming in from the UK, that has had a significant growth, very aggressive attitude. I came into these boards with similar way. But what I find is in the UK, the emotional aspect that comes into a board level is very different. It's very aggressive. It's black or white. There's little gray, and you just hit it home. But in Sri Lanka, what I'm finding, and that was very helpful for me, is there's a significant amount more emotions involved with everybody concerned.
Right.
So how you tackle that at boardroom level, I learned a lot on that. And that's helping me even running my own businesses because there's a way of how you must approach things, which is very different to how it is in Europe or in the States. So,
And what are your main goals and objectives at Steradian Capital?
yeah, so
And how do you contribute in terms of your role as executive director?
yeah, so this is a organization we started with 4 people, and everybody did everything. Today we directly employ up to 600 people, and we want to be a prominent player in the real estate space. So by that, our initial idea was, have a land bank. It's like a factory line, a land bank, planning assets, development assets, income producing assets, and have about 50% of your portfolio being in income producing assets. So whether it's office buildings, shopping centers, very well asset managed, facility managed properties where you're providing tenants a seamless solution. So that's what our original plan was. But what we've realized in Sri Lanka is buying land takes time. It could take between 6 months and a year.
Yeah.
Seeking planning permission could take anything between a year to 3 years. And then building could take another 3 to 4. So average your story to begin and to have an operational product could take 7 years. And that's a long time.
And how did your foreigners, your foreign investors, your friends from UK, how did they react to this?
No, so they had decent runs here in Sri Lanka with us early
Okay.
stage
Okay.
because we were doing business in a very private environment.
Mm-hmm.
But the law changed that listed companies foreign ownership wasn't an issue. So that's why we went into the listed form.
Right.
And they also find it frustrating that the planning process and the development process can take so long. So, but so in one hand, we are trying to make sure that the laws are more friendly, and while lobbying those changes from a positive perspective, benchmarking the faster growing economies in the world. That's one thing where we look to do. At the same time, we have also sort of sharpened our product offering. We've changed it, so we don't want to build ground up anymore. But what we'll do is we'll buy existing well-located buildings and go through a refurbishment process, so that the time frame that you take is significantly reduced. And we will look to embark on more sort of greenfield site developments only once the laws have changed, because that we don't get the necessary security, because investors who are coming in are looking to make good returns, especially if they're taking the risk of coming to an emerging economy. They look for higher returns
Indeed.
for that risk that they take.
Yeah.
So the planning process needs to be streamlined, and developers need to get more security during the development pipeline, because it's very easy for anybody to go and file a case and stop your development.
Indeed.
So with that sort of, the risk is far too high. So we've experienced this while developing Mulberry, which has taken us 10 years through the pandemic,
Right.
and you can't take that long, and you lose money. Whereas the positive stories have been Unity Plaza, which we've taken and completely transformed in a short time and done very well with it. Similarly, LRD building, which is the HQ Colombo, we've done similar. We've bought shifted rents more than 100% asset managed, and it's a much shorter timeline. Similarly, we've done the same on multiple other buildings in Colombo.
And Sri Lanka, new president, new parliament, a new ambience, promising change. Do you think that this government will be committed to easing and facilitating doing business, like you talk about the frustrations of approvers and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think, look, it's a new feel, a new look. I'm very optimistic. There's no other way to be, but not foolishly optimistic, but optimistic. I think the present regime will have no choice but to, because if you do not make your laws and policies benchmarked against the global best,
Yeah.
it will be very difficult for us to compete. And so the government, the present government, has no choice but to grow the economy. They have no choice but to grow it.
They have to grow it.
They have to grow it.
Yes.
And in order to grow it, there aren't too many levers that they have. And the levers that they have to ease, ensure investment comes in
Yeah.
to Sri Lanka, and they've got to target specific sectors as well. And they've got to have a proper understanding of how they're going to go about it. Right? If you don't expand this economy, we have been, as a country, for the last 10 years, we've been stagnant or gone backwards. We are under the $4,000 GDP trap, and that is probably one of the hardest challenges for a country to get
go
over.
over.
So once you get to the 8,000, the cake is big enough. Everything starts to then snowball. So it's the challenge that it's facing. I think there have been some very good appointments that the present government has made. If you take the Port City Commission, the members are fantastic. Whether it's Harsha Amarasekara, or whether it's Sanjay Kulatunga, whether it's Harsha Subasinghe, Rhea Bevana, all seasoned business people, entrepreneurs, and the other good or top level lawyers who are more than capable of delivering.
What sort of challenges or opportunities do you foresee for investors in the future?
See, I think how I look at it is there are certain things that can happen in the short term. So, say, tourism for me is a sector that we are also in and have been invested in for a period, is probably the lowest hanging fruit. And I think opportunities in the leisure space, in the tourism space, is quite a bit. I feel If we continue the same trajectory, we can get to about 3.3 to 3.4 million tourists in the next year, next calendar year. But we have to concentrate to see how we can enable that. The government has to ensure the enablers are in place. So we are an island nation.
Yeah.
Right? You can't swim into here for us.
Yeah.
Right? You need to ensure that you get an aircraft that brings you in.
Right.
So that's our first bottleneck. Right? So when I did some research around it in 2018-19, the highest level of tourists we received was 2.3 million. At that point, we were handling 94 flights in and out of the country.
Right.
And we passengers at BIA was roughly 9.6 million passenger handling. And that equated to, so the mix is 22% for you to equate to 2.3 million tourists. So very simple, if we want to get to 5 million tourists a year, we need to have 225 aircraft coming in and out of this island.
Every
Every day.
day.
Every day.
Okay.
Right, in and out. So how do we go about that? How do we handle it? You need to unlock that. Right. So things like now, very simple. My father came back from India yesterday. Peak, his flight landed at 10:15. Airport's a mess. You come out, your passenger handling must be smooth. That's the first point. So how do we, the existing infrastructure, how do we improve the efficiency? That needs to be looked at. Right? And it had taken them 20 minutes to get from the car to get the car out onto the road. Right? So policing, how you manage that part, you don't need to invest anything. It's a discipline that you need to deploy. So the airport becomes a key thing. Then we've got to start thinking also you need to get budget carriers flying into this country. Now, I was looking at Ratmalana, and we were told, so that there's three bodies that look after this area. So there's a civil aviation, you get airport aviation, and then Sri Lankan ground handling. So how you coordinate these three bodies to talk to each other is key. Right? So the way to increase the number of passengers you need to have flights. How do you go about increasing flights? Existing operators need to increase frequency, or new carriers need to come in. Right? That's the only ways to do it. Right? So in order to bring in new carriers, the civil aviation application is about that big. In Singapore, it's 16 pages.
Right.
So you need to streamline that. You need to then look at the rates. We don't have two separate rates for ground handling. Wide body aircraft and a narrow body aircraft both have one rate.
Okay.
So it becomes the ground handling portion of a ticket becomes for a budget carrier becomes about 25%. So a lot of them is not attractive. So I was asking the question, why not Ratmalana? Ratmalana was our first international airport. It's ready, can go. Get the budget carriers to fly in there. They then said they need to extend the runway. Okay, fine. I said, and you have to go over Gold Road. So I asked the question, why can't you go the other way?
Yeah.
And they said, oh, you have to then fly over the Sri Lankan Parliament.
Yes.
And there's one letter that has been issued in 2003 preventing you from going over there. Now, then I said, okay, Washington, D.C. airport, all commercial flights are going over the Pentagon, right? So you have to get rid of that letter. Commercial flights that are doing 30,000 feet above should be allowed to fly. And then they're like, but why do you need to extend? So I compared City of London airport and Ratmalana. Ratmalana strip is longer than City of London. Right? So something's not, so if you really want to do it, it's only the turning circle you need. And then you say, okay, you can budget carriers, we open up our skies, you guys come in, use Ratmalana, we will give you cheap ground handling and cheap landing fees for you to go about to push this up. So if you want to accelerate, we need Terminal 2 to come online. Up until such time, you need to utilize Mattala and Ratmalana. And this can be done. Right? So I think there's no question the president is going to drive it. I've seen him lecturing all the public servants. Personally, I think we have a good public service. We have good administrators. Empowering them is a good thing. Yet, however, I feel empowering alone is not enough. You need to give them targets. This is a project I want implemented by this date. And you need to monitor it on a monthly basis. A bit like how Premadasa ran the garment program in order to get results. That alone. So I think tourism is one sector that definitely has scope. Then it's export-led businesses. How do we go about making sure our existing exporters are given facility to expand? And then the next stage is how do we facilitate to bring in other top global producers to come and set up here. Now, with the American potential tariffs being applied from China, a lot of the people are looking to set up in other places. How do we open up to them for them to come in? I think that's important. Then you have the maritime sector, which is again another low-hanging fruit. Hambantota, how can you set up, a proper industrial zone surrounding the infrastructure of having such a lovely port there?
Yeah.
So enable, whoever that operator is, a Chinese operator, make sure the regulations are in place in a world-class way for us to go about it. Then the renewable side, we need to fast track renewable development in terms of wind or solar. Even the Adani project, get on with it, but the price must be negotiated.
Of course.
Bring in investment, drive it fast, concentrate on some sectors, and ensure that it's monitored and delivered fast. Otherwise, we'll have another 10 years stagnant years, and I don't think this country can afford it.
Can you share a successful investment or transaction that you are particularly proud of, and walk us through the sort of decision making process behind it?
Sure. I think acquisition of the LRD building was a really good success story, or
Yeah.
even Unity Plaza. So they're both similar.
Right.
Unity Plaza, very happy about that because we were targeting listed companies that were trading at relatively low pricing of how we go about it. There was no controlling shareholder.
Yeah.
So it was piecing together, buying 6 people's shares in one go on
Right.
one day,
Yeah.
and then to take board control.
Right.
That was a very exciting one. My analyst came back and said, "Oh, we can't look at only because there's no controlling shareholder." And then I looked across the shareholder list and I was like, I can have a crack at it. And over the weekend managed to convince 6 of them separately to sell on a particular day at a particular price.
Okay.
And after that, I went about, because I had no access to the building itself. I was in my bicycle cycling around Unity Plaza, looking and climbing up and down the fire staircase to actually see what the asset management story of what I can put in. So without having the information, physically, going there and checking it out, understanding what the rents were at that time, and what I can potentially lift it to, and what changes I'm going to do. So the entire study was done without having access. Only I had access to public information, which was on the listed front, and the rest of the actual work that was needed to be done was done, by physically moving around. So I mean, good example there. I found out the ground floor was by them, and they were paying rent of 380 rupees a square foot.
Right.
Because Vijayappa's son is a friend of mine.
Yeah.
So I asked him, "Hey, what's the rent you're paying per square
Right.
foot?" And he said 380 rupees. So I knew I can achieve close to 1,000 rupees there.
Right.
And his lease was coming up. So that's the kind of level of detail that had to be done in order to fulfill that. So we executed the transaction where I got 50.8%, and then took board control, took over the building. And at that time, the rent produced was 180 million a year. Today it's producing 360 million a year. We managed to completely refurbish the building, reposition it, make it that one-stop IT shop. Today, 65% of all IT and IT accessories the country is being provided out of that building. So I'm very proud of that.
So, Hadi, what sets Steradian Capital apart from other investment firms, and what unique strategies do you employ to generate returns for your clients?
Yeah, so Steradian Capital, the uniqueness is we really benchmark ourselves against the global best, try to ensure that the investors that come on board have a fantastic experience, because it's very important. Credibility is everything. We have a thorough process in analyzing our investments prior to, and we have a process of communicating these messages very clearly to our investors before they buy into us. And it's a process that is tested and we have principles that we apply, which is a framework that investors either buy in or they don't. It's a very clear framework. It's set out. If they buy into it, it's like five core articles that we have,
Right.
and then another five principles that we base
Okay.
it around. So it's a very tight framework, and within that is where we operate. So yeah, and everything that we do, we pride ourselves in being the best at it, and that's what all the employees there also believe in. They're all committed to it, and investments can go right, they can go wrong, but how you go about it will give the clarity to everyone that that process has been followed.
And then how do you stay informed about market trends, developments, and how do you adapt your investment strategies accordingly?
So we're learning all the time. Participate in a lot of global championing events, and we contribute as well. We have a very good global network of property developers, construction industry that we participate in, and all the best in class come and contribute. So that's a fantastic place to have access to. That is fantastic. So we get to see all the new trends of what's coming up, whether it's a new material that's being utilized in home building or office building, or whether it is a new debt structure that is coming through with cheaper debt for sustainable buildings, whether it's turning most of your buildings into green buildings, and what other additional funding lines are available. So we have a very good global network with access to that. So we are constantly learning, and both Archie and I, we try to at least participate in two or three of those events globally, and the rest of it, we are in the market here, so we can see typically what the take up is, size, shape, form. I would have liked to have seen this market grow, and in fact, in 2013, when we were looking to move here, one of the major drivers was the port city development. It's the equivalent size of Marina Bay, and that is a place where, from a planned perspective, property or real estate investment development can take a new sort of.
But for some reason, that's not really taken off.
Yes. I think there's geopolitics in it and various other forms that has stalled it. But it's 1.3 billion rupees spent on a reclamation. It's a ready site. I think that can be a real driver to spur our economic growth here.
And perhaps the new commission members might play a role.
I think so. I think the new commission members have a huge role in that. But I believe the DG of such a commission is key. And it's a bit like, with respect to everyone here, no, I don't have the expertise to be a DG of the Port City Commission. Even though I'm a seasoned property developer and investor, I don't have it. So you need to, there are other projects globally that have already been executed successfully, whether it's Marina Bay, Forest Lake, there's one in Atlanta, in Qatar. There are about 8 such projects that have been successfully developed. You need to get the man who has, one of the guys has to be a person who has experience in delivering those projects. And we need to get that top DG in. I always say, you have a good CEO, you have a good business. You have a good principal, you have a good school, right? So you need a tried and tested person to come and be the DG who can actually implement the vision of Port City Sri Lanka. So it's very important.
And finally, could you very quickly provide us some insight or predictions on the future of the finance industry and how investors can position themselves for success in the long term in Sri Lanka?
Personally, I think Sri Lanka has a lot of legs in most areas, whether it's in property, whether it's in the stock market, whether it's in the bond markets. I believe that a lot of Sri Lankan retail investors were, buying bonds at very high rates. They were putting their money on FDs at very high rates. Now rates have come down to 9%, and you're starting to see the equity market flourish. So the weight of money shifting from bonds into equities. I believe the equity market is has a lot of legs. If the main thrust of this is the economic growth. If we manage to get up to about 6.5 GDP, this whole place is going to be completely different. So what I always say is, investment is a tricky space, but save and start to invest early. For a compounding effect of long-term in the long term is massive. So in terms of investment, I think the property sector, without a shadow of a doubt, hasn't grown over the last 5 years. And when you have a pandemic and you have your currency depreciating so much, it's the tail wag the dog scenario, and it will catch up. So it has taken 3 to 4 years, no growth at all. And suddenly you will find that the cost of construction is so high, the reinstatement value is high, but the valuers are not giving high valuations for it. So earlier building, you could build 10,000 rupees a square foot, today it would be 30,000 rupees a square foot. But that is 3 times more expensive to build. Yet the reinstatement value is not transferring into actual value yet.
Right.
The valuers are not giving that out yet. So I believe the property sector has a lot of legs. The equity markets have a lot of legs. And in general, with consumer demand increasing, entrepreneurs in specific areas have a lot of scope as well.
So Sri Lanka, the future looks bright?
Absolutely. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. We are in it for the long haul. I think 30-year play. You have these cycles that you expect, but it's a fantastic country, brilliant place to live in. I think that in the region, if we structure ourselves well, if we benchmark properly, make the laws easier for foreigners to invest, especially, and the ease of doing business to be easier, I believe that this country has immense potential to grow fast.
Thank you very much, Hadi Jamaldeen, for being on The Turning Point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's the way it was on The Turning Point. Take care, have a great evening, and as always, God bless you all.